Hello and good morning. We are the group number 4 and we will be discussing about the lymphatic system. Based from the book, there are 4 learning objectives. The first one is, how is the lymphatic system functionally related to the cardiovascular system and the immune defenses? What are the two major types of structures composing the lymphatic system? Then explaining its formation and transport, then the importance of antigen presenting cells in immunity. Nung prelim, familiar na rin sa atin ang lymphatic system. Ang pinaka nagko-complement sa lymphatic system are the lymphatic vessels, lymph nodes, lymphoid organs such as the spleen and tonsils. Take note, the three functions of lymphatic system are fluid balance, fat absorption, and defense. Ang meaning ng lymph, it is an excess tissue fluid carried by lymphatic vessels. There are three properties of lymphatic vessels. Number 1, it is a one-way system toward the heart. There is no pump. Lymph move toward the heart. There is also a milking action of skeletal muscle and rhythmic contraction of smooth muscles sa vessel walls. Ang lymphatic vessels naman, it returns the fluid that is leaked from the blood pabalik sa blood vessels para maging continuous ang circulation sa ating body. Sa lymph capillaries, walls overlap to form flap-like mini valve. Fluid leaks into lymph capillaries. Capillaries are anchored to connective tissue by filaments. Higher pressure on the inside closes mini valves. Fluid is forced along the vessel. Sa diagram sa left side, the lymph capillaries are more closer on one side to form larger lymph vessel if they are joined together. The lymph does not specifically circulate, but it only drains in order to reach the veins. Sa lymphatic collecting vessels naman, it returns the fluid to circulatory veins near the heart. There are two main lymphatic ducts. The first one is the right lymphatic duct to transport the lymph pabalik sa circulatory system. If blocking occurs, possible lang mag-cause ng lymphedema due to swelling and blockage sa lymph passage. While the thoracic duct, or the largest lymphatic vessel sa human body, it drains the lymph into the circulatory system sa left brachiocephalic vein between the left subclavian and left internal jugular veins. Sa diagram naman dito, the green keys indicated the right lymphatic duct. So meaning doon sila nagde-drain, while yung red keys naman are drained sa thoracic duct. For the lymphoid tissues and organs, we can see the spleen and thymus gland. So yung spleen naman, ang size nito is kapag tinench natin yung fist natin. It is also located on the left side of the abdomen. It filters blood, destroys worn out blood cells, forms blood cells in the fetus, and it acts as a blood reservoir. Sa thymus gland naman, it is located low in the throat, overlying the heart, functions at peak levels only during childhood or puberty stage. It produces hormones like thymosin to program lymphocytes. So yung thymosin naman, hormone siya ng thymus. It is site for maturation of lymphocytes. Then sa lymphocytes naman, it is a type of white blood cell part of the immune system. There are two main types of lymphocytes, which are the B cells and T cells, responsible for much of immunity. Here, we can see the tonsils and Peyer's patches. Ang tonsils, it is a small masses of lymphoid tissue around the pharynx. It traps and removes the bacteria and other foreign materials. Tonsillitis kasi is caused by common viruses, and the most common bacterium that causes tonsillitis is Streptococcus pyogenes. Sa Peyer's patches naman, it is found in the wall sa ileum region ng small intestine. It also protects and destroy potential pathogen. And nire-resemble na rin yung tonsils in terms of its structure. The mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue or MALT are found in the submucosal membrane sites of the body like the gastrointestinal tract, nasopharynx, thyroid, skin, lung, and etc. It acts as a sentinel to protect respiratory and digestive tracts, which includes the following: the Peyer's patches, tonsils, other small accumulation of lymphoid tissue. A while ago, na-discuss na rin ang lymph and lymph nodes. So, ang lymph, it is a harmful materials that enter the lymph vessels, like bacteria, viruses, cancer cells, and cell debris. Sa lymph nodes naman, it filter the lymph before it is returned to the blood. Defense cells within lymph nodes, such as macrophage, it engulf and destroy foreign substances. Sa lymphocytes naman, it provide immune response to antigens. Sa right side, makikita natin ang structure ng lymph node. Most are kidney-shaped and less than 1 inch long. Sa cortex, outer part siya, containing follicles, which is a collection of lymphocytes. Sa medulla, inner part, containing phagocytic macrophage. Sa flow of lymph through nodes, lymph enters the convex side through afferent lymphatic vessels. Lymph flows through a number of sinuses inside the node. Lymph exits through efferent lymphatic vessels. Fewer efferent than afferent vessels causes flow to be slowed. Ang afferent lymphatic vessels kasi, it carries the lymph into the nodes to enter the efferent vessels to carry lymph away from the nodes. Since mas marami ang afferent compared sa efferent kasi ang passage ng lymph through the sinuses are slower and allows time for much more cleaning process. This is Diana Afante reporting the introduction to lymphatic system. Thank you.
Next is the importance of antigen-presenting cells in immunity. But first, what is body defenses? Body defense is an automatic reaction of the body against disease-causing organisms, such as bacteria, fungi, and viruses, which the body is constantly in contact. The body has two defense systems for foreign materials. First, the innate or the non-specific defense system. Second is the adaptive or specific defense system. Immunity is the ability of an organism to resist a particular infection or toxin by the action of specific antibodies or sensitized white blood cells. So you can see on this table what is under the two types of defense mechanism. First, the innate or the non-specific defense mechanism, we have the first line of defense that includes skin, mucous membrane, and secretions of skin and mucous membrane. Next is the second line of defense, which includes phagocytic cells, natural cells, microbial proteins, and the inflammatory response. While under the second type of defense mechanism, the adaptive or specific body mechanism, we have the third line of defense. Under it is the lymphocytes, antibodies, and macrophages, and other antigen-presenting cells that will be discussed later. Let's proceed to the innate or non-specific defense mechanism, second line of defense. The internal defense of the body uses an enormous number of cells and chemicals such as natural killer cells, inflammatory response, phagocytes, antimicrobial proteins, and fever. For the first line of defense, innate body defenses are mechanical barriers to pathogens such as body surface coverings that includes skin and mucous membrane. Skin covers the body surfaces, lines body cavities, and forms protective sheets around the organ, while the mucous membrane lines all body cavities that open to the exterior body surface to protect the body from a harmful external agents and forms a barrier which prevents pathogens from entering. Next is the specialized human cells. Most notable is the specialized white blood cells called lymphocytes, and antigen-presenting cells that are transported to the regional lymph nodes, where the immune system encounters pathogens, microbes, and other immune elicitors that are filtered from the lymph fluid. Last is the chemical produced by the body. First is the oil or sebum. It is a lubricant for the skin, prevents brittle hair, and kills bacteria. Second is the sweat. Its acidic nature inhibits the growth of bacteria, and the odor that we smell is from the associated bacteria. Let's discuss further the innate non-specific defense mechanism, second line of defense. First, the natural killer cells or NK cells. It plays a major role in the host rejection of both tumors and virally infected cells, and it controls several types of tumors and microbial infections by limiting their spread and subsequent tissue damage. It releases a chemical called perforin to target the cell's membrane and nucleus, causing disintegration. Second is the inflammatory response. It occurs when tissues are injured by bacteria, trauma, toxins, heat, or any other causes. The four most common indicators of acute inflammation is redness, heat, swelling, and pain. It prevents spread of damaging agents, disposes cell debris and pathogens, and sets the stage for repair. We can see in this picture the inflammatory chemicals diffusing from the inflamed site as chemotactic agents. First is the neutrophils. It enters blood from the bone marrow and roll along the vessel wall. Neutrophils helps prevent infections by blocking, disabling, digesting, or warding off invading particles and microorganisms. They also communicate with other cells to help them repair cells and mount a proper immune response. Next is the capillary wall. It performs an important function by allowing nutrients and waste substances to pass across it. Under the capillary wall, we have the endothelium. It is a single layer of squamous endothelial cells that line the interior surface of blood vessels and lymphatic vessels. The endothelium forms an interface between circulating blood or lymph in the lumen and the rest of the vessel wall. Next is the basement membrane. It also referred to as basal laminae, are extracellular sheets of proteins that surround tissues, providing structural support, a filtration function, and the surface for cell attachment, migration, and differentiation. Next is diapedesis, or the passage of blood cells through the intact walls of the capillaries, typically accompanying inflammation. Next is the positive chemotaxis. But first, what is chemotaxis? Chemotaxis is a movement of a motile cell or organism or part of one in a direction corresponding to a gradient of increasing or decreasing concentration of a particular substances. Positive chemotaxis occurs if the movement is toward a higher concentration of the chemical. Third, second line of defense is the phagocytes. Cells such as neutrophils and macrophages engulf foreign material into a vacuole. Enzymes from lysosomes digest the material. In short, phagocytes are cells that protect the body by ingesting harmful foreign particles, bacteria, and dead or dying cells. Fourth is the antimicrobial proteins. It attacks the microorganism, hinder reproduction of microorganisms, complement proteins, and interferon. We can see in this picture that first, phagocyte adheres to pathogens. Second, phagocyte engulfs the particles, forming a phagosome. Third, lysosome fuses with the phagocytic vesicle, forming a phagolysosome. Fourth, lysosomal enzymes digest the pathogens or debris, leaving a residual body. Lastly, exocytosis of the vesicle removes indigestible and residual material. Lastly, the fifth second line of defense, fever. Abnormally high body temperature. Hypothalamus heat regulation can be reset by pyrogens, secreted by white blood cells. High temperatures inhibit the release of iron and zinc from the liver and spleen needed by bacteria. Fever also increases the speed of tissue repair.
Adaptive defense mechanism. There are three aspects of adaptive defense. But first, let's talk about adaptive defense. In adaptive defense, it must expressly introduce a specific pathogen and recognize threat before it will attack. Since they are exposed to that pathogen, the adaptive defense have the ability to remember specific pathogen, which is the key difference between adaptive and innate defense. So in the three aspects of adaptive defense, antigens, specific, recognize and attack against particular foreign substance. So antigens would be an invader from outside the world like bacterium, virus, or fungus, or even toxin and disease cell within your body. Antigens are also a large signaling molecules not normally found in the body, which they act like flags and get the adaptive immune system riled up. So systemic is not restricted to initial infection site. So when we say systemic, it refers to the entire body rather than the single organ like circulatory system or other system. Memory, so in adaptive defense, we have memory, which is we are able to recognize and mounts a stronger attack on previously encountered pathogens. Antigens non-self. Any substance capable of exciting the immune system and provoking an immune response. Example of common antigens, foreign proteins, nucleic acid, large carbohydrates, some lipids, pollen grains, and microorganisms. When we talk about non-self antigens, it is molecule that the immune system recognizes as foreign or non-self and treat it as a foe. So our immune system When they saw this kind of antigens, they attacked this. Self-antigens. In self-antigens, human cells have many surface proteins. Our immune cells do not attack our own proteins. Our cells in another person's body can trigger immune response because they are foreign. So, when we talk about self-antigens, it is called as self-marker. It is antigens labels the body cells as friends and it is tolerated by our immune system. Unlike the non-self, it is attacked. In self-antigen, it is tolerated. Allergies. Many small molecules called haptens or incomplete antigens are not antigenic, but link up with their own proteins. The immune system may recognize and respond to a protein-hapten combination. The immune system response is harmful rather than protective because it attacks our own cell. So, allergy refers to the abnormal reaction of the immune system to otherwise harmless substance. When we have allergy, the immune system response have the inability to have self-tolerance or knowing how not to attack your own body's own cell. Self-adaptive defense system. Lymphocyte respond to specific antigen. B lymphocyte or B cells originate in the bone marrow as it matures to identify friend or foe. It colonizes your secondary lymphoid organs. If B cell bump into an antigen it has antibodies for, it binds to it and triggers the power of humoral response. B cells start cloning itself of similar cell to fight that one particular antigen. So, B cell can be memory cell or the long-lived cell or effective cell or also known as plasma cell. Next is T lymphocyte. T lymphocyte recognize antigen based on two-chain protein receptor. T cell do not recognize free-floating or cell-bound antigens. They only recognize antigens on the surface of the specialized cell, called antigen-presenting cells. Macrophage helps lymphocytes. Immunocompetent is developed when the cell matures. So immunocompetent cell became capable of responding to a specific antigen by binding to it, or in short, how to recognize or bind to a particular antigen. Next is lymphocyte. Lymphocyte is a small white blood cell that plays a large role in defending the body against disease. Lymphocytes are responsible for immune response. There are two main types of lymphocytes that we talked about a while ago, B cells and T cells. Originate from the hemocytoblast in the red bone marrow. So, B lymphocyte become immunocompetent in the bone marrow, while the T lymphocyte became immunocompetent in the thymus. So remember, B for bone marrow and T for thymus. As you look at the picture, red bone marrow is the site of lymphocyte origin. Primary lymphoid organ, site of develop of the immunocompetence of the B or T cells. Second lymphoid organ, site for the antigen encounter and activation to become effector or memory B cells or T cells. Effector is the one who fight, and the memory is when the cell is old and they are becoming the blueprint of the cell. Lymphocyte destined to become T cells migrate to the thymus and develop immunocompetence there. B cell develop immunocompetence in the red bone marrow. Immunocompetence is still naive. Lymphocytes leave the thymus and the bone marrow. They sit to the lymph nodes, spleen, and other lymphoid tissue. They will encounter the antigen and become activated. Antigens activated, immunocompetence in lymphocytes circulate continuously to the bloodstreams and lymph throughout the lymphoid organs of the body. Macrophage arise from the monocytes, become widely distributed in the lymphoid organs, secrete cytokines. Cytokines is protein important for the immune response, tend to remain fixed in the lymphoid organ. So macrophage stimulates T cells to release cytokines that enhance phagocytosis. Next, antigen-presenting cell. So antigen-presenting cell presents antigen to the cell that will actually deal with the antigen. So there are three major types: dendritic cells, macrophages, and B lymphocytes. So we already talked about the macrophage and the B lymphocyte. So what is the dendritic cell? So the dendritic cell also kill pathogen by phagocytosis, but their major function is to bring antigen to the regional draining lymph nodes. We have two types of immunity: humoral immunity and cellular immunity. Humoral immunity, antibody immediate immunity, provided by the antibodies presented in body fluids. Cellular immunity, cell-mediate immunity, target various infected cell, cancer cell, and cell of the foreign grafts. So these types of immunity will be discussed widely by Ms. Lorraine Denise Solomon.
So, from what we have said earlier, meron po tayong dalawang types ng immunity. And one of them is the humoral immunity. So, I will discuss to you the humoral immune response, or what we call the antibody-mediated response. So, in humoral immune response, most B cells become plasma cells, and these plasma cells produce antibodies to destroy antigens, and their activity lasts for 4 to 5 days. Some B cells become long-lived memory cells, or what we call the secondary humoral response. And what do we mean by secondary humoral response? It is when the memory cells are long-lived and a second exposure causes a rapid response, and the secondary response is stronger and longer lasting. So there are two types of humoral immunity, the active and passive humoral immunity. So in active immunity, it occurs when B cells encounter antigens and produce antibodies. Active immunity can be naturally acquired during bacterial and viral infections, or it can be artificially acquired from vaccines. On the other hand, passive immunity occurs when antibodies are obtained from someone else. It may be conferred naturally from a mother to her fetus, or it may be conferred artificially from immune serum or gamma globulin. Immunological memory does not occur, and protection is provided by borrowed antibodies. So these are the examples of acquired immunity. In naturally acquired immunity, we have the active immunity, which can be acquired from infection or contact with pathogen. And in passive, it is when the antibodies pass from mother to fetus via placenta or to infant in her milk. In artificially acquired immunity, active immunity happens when we take vaccines, or it can be acquired through attenuated pathogens. In passive, it can be acquired through injection of immune serum or the gamma globulin. So let's now go to antibodies, or what we call the immunoglobulins. So immunoglobulins are the soluble proteins secreted by B cells or the plasma cells. They are carried in the blood plasma. They are capable of binding specifically to an antigen, or what we call the process of inactivation. For its structure, the antibody has 4 amino acid chains linked by disulfide bonds. There are 2 identical amino acid chains that are linked to form a heavy chain. The other 2 identical chains are called light chains, and there is a specific antigen binding site. So as we can see in this picture, the heavy chain is indicated by the purple colored part, and the light chain is the blue colored part. So we can see that the heavy chain is bonded by the disulfide bonds. So there are different antibody classes, and each class have slightly different roles, but there is 5 major immunoglobulin classes. The first one is the immunoglobulin M, which can fix complement. It can be found mostly in the blood. The immunoglobulin A is found mainly in the mucus. It can also be found in our saliva or our tears. The immunoglobulin D is important in activation of the B cell. The immunoglobulin G can cross the placental barrier and fix complement. It is the most abundant immunoglobulin in our body, and it can be found in our body fluids. The last one is the immunoglobulin E, which is involved in allergies, which is why it can be found mostly in our skin and lungs.
The main difference between the two arms of the adaptive response is that B cells secrete their antibody weapons, whereas T cells fight their antigens directly. Like B cells, immunocompetent T cells are activated to form a clone by binding with a recognized antigen. However, unlike B cells, T cells are not able to bind with free antigens. Instead, the antigens must be presented by a macrophage must occur. T cell clones. First, cytotoxic T cells specialize in killing virus-infected, cancer, or foreign grafts cells directly. One way a cytotoxic T cells accomplishes this is by binding tightly to a foreign cell and releasing toxic chemicals called perforin and granzymes from its granules. The perforin enters the foreign cell's plasma membrane. Shortly thereafter, pores appear in the target cell's membrane, allowing the granzymes to enter and kill the foreign cell. The cytotoxic T cell then detaches and seeks other foreign prey to attack. Second, helper T cells are the T cells that act as the directors or managers of the adaptive immune response. Once activated, they circulate through the body, recruiting other cells to fight the invaders. For example, helper T cells interact directly with B cells, prodding the B cells into more rapid division and then, like the boss of an assembly line, signaling for antibody formation to begin. Lastly, regulatory T cells, formerly called suppressor T cells, release chemicals that suppress the activity of both T and B cells. Regulatory T cells are vital for winding down and stopping the immune response after an antigen has been successfully inactivated or destroyed. This helps prevent uncontrolled or unnecessary immune system activity. Most of the T cells enlisted to fight in a particular immune response are dead within a few days. However, a few members of each clone are long-lived memory cells that remain behind to provide the immunological memory for each antigen encountered and enable the body to respond quickly to subsequent invasions.
For the organ transplant sa lymphatic system po, it's a end-to-end anastomosis starting with a two opposite and tied sutures that can be used to turn the vessels for access to all sides, allowing completion for the anastomosis with running for simple sutures depending on the diameter po nung mismong organ po. And then, when it comes to, yung name po ng suture na yon is chiral vascular suture for lymph circulation po. Lymphatic disease is a malfunction of the lymphatic system in which fluid or lymph does not pass properly through the lymph nodes and lymphatic vessels. The most common lymphatic disease is lymphedema. The most prevalent lymphatic disorder is lymphatic insufficiency, or this is an accumulation of lymphatic fluids in the interstitial tissue causing swelling, most often in the arms or around the legs area, and occasionally in other parts of the body. The severity of this disease varies from very mild complications to disfiguring, painful, and disabling conditions. In addition, patients are often susceptible to serious life-threatening cellulite infections, and if untreated can spread systematically or require surgical interventions. Yung isa po sa mga one of the common lymphatic issues or disorder po is primary lymphedema is an inherited disease that can affect approximately 0.6% of live births, and in which there is a congenital defect of the lymph transporting system. It can be present at birth, develop at onset of puberty, or present in adulthood with no apparent causes. And the lymphatic system does not develop properly. Those affected with primary lymphedema will have swelling of various parts of the body due to the accumulation of the lymph. And other example pa po is yung lymphatic filariasis. Is a world health problem resulting from a parasitic caused infection causing lymphatic insufficiency, and in some cases predisposes elephantiasis. The World Health Organization has a recent efforts to eradicate the spread of infections due to not addressing or eliminate the resulting lymphedema.
The developmental aspects of the lymphatic system and the body defenses. Except for the thymus and spleen, the lymphoid organs are poorly developed before birth. A newborn has no functioning lymphocytes at birth, only passive immunity from the mother. If lymphatics are removed or lost, severe edema results, but vessels grow back in time. That is all for the discussion of the lymphatic system. We hope you learned something from us. Thank you for listening.